Hey YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. As you guys can tell from the title of this video, today we are going to be talking about the differences between Italians and Americans when it comes to shopping, spending. What do they buy? How much do they buy it for? Let's talk about it. I'm obviously not going to be able to talk about everything because it's kind of a complicated topic with lots of different factors, so I'm just going to pick and choose the ones that I thought were the most interesting. Let's begin. The first difference between Italians and Americans is exactly how much they spend. There's a Pew study that says almost half of Americans spend more money than they make. And now, if you're from Italy or maybe other countries from Europe, you're probably like, how is it possible? Well, because the credit card system and the credit system works much differently in America. Basically, in America, it's really easy to get credit cards, loans, and it's very easy to get a lot. A lot of Americans, their biggest issue is credit card debt and spending money that they don't have. And I feel like we are taught from a really young age that this is normal, this is what everyone does, this is how you achieve the American dream. Everybody knows that you don't buy a house, you take out a mortgage and then you say that it's yours. If you don't pay that $30,000 for that car, you lease it. Everybody knows that you're not going to be able to pay $30,000 a year for school. You just get a student loan, and we're told from we're very young that it's what you have to do. And also, America makes it so that you need to have credit. In America, we have this thing called a credit score, and you either have a good credit score, a bad credit score, or an okay credit score. And this is all calculated based on how much debt you take out and how fast you pay it off. And it's tracked for time. And having no credit is just about as bad as having bad credit. And you need your credit score because when you go to ask for the mortgage to get a house, your credit score is going to decide whether you can get the mortgage for your house and how much you're going to be paying on that mortgage. You're going to have lower monthly payments, for example, if you have good credit. And this goes the same for everything, like if you want to lease a car or something, which, like I said, ain't nobody in America, well, of course there are some people, but most people don't buy their houses outright, so you need to have credit, and that means you need to take out credit. Even though I don't live in America, I know how important it is to have credit in America, and so I've decided that if I were to ever go back, I want to have credit, good credit. And so I did take out a credit card last year that I use here. It was interesting, the fact that even though I didn't have a job, I didn't have any credit history, it was very easy to get this credit card with a $1,000 limit on it. And a lot of young people, they'll get that $1,000 limit and really think that they have $1,000 to spend. But I went to business school. I know what these banks are trying to do. I know what these credit card companies are trying to do. And so what I do is I use that credit card to pay for most of my daily expenses, like a coffee, if I want to buy a new shirt. I use that credit card and then I pay it back at the end of the month, every month. And of course, I never use it for more than I'm going to be making. I never use it for more than I have, you know? And so in a year, I have almost a perfect credit score. And if I wanted to go home right now and take out a loan or get a house, I could. But the sad part is most people don't think of it this way. A lot of people go into credit card debt. They think of credit as being money that you use now and you can pay back far down the line. They don't take into account interest, and it creates a mess. This is impossible in Italy because, first of all, credit scores don't exist in Italy, not in that sense. If you want to buy a mortgage, they're not really looking at your credit history. They're looking at whether you have a contratto indeterminato or not, and how much money you're making every month, and how solid is that income going to be. So credit is not even necessary. It's not particularly hard to get a credit card in Italy, but they're not going to give you a credit card that has like a $10,000 limit. And also the credit card isn't going to let you keep going into debt either. Things work much differently here. The first thing that I kind of went on a tangent about is the fact that Americans tend to spend more money than they actually make, and Italians don't. In this section, I decided to bypass the more obvious costs of living, such as payment for housing, payment for transportation, because in the end, Italians and Americans both spend the most on these things. We differ just in absolute value, but that's
a difference in cost of living, not necessarily a difference in culture. I went ahead and decided to look at things outside of these costs to see where some cultural spending differences could arise.
What would you think that Italians spend the most on? If you said food, that's what I thought at first too, but we're all wrong. Italians don't spend that much money on food. And if you really think about it, it makes sense because food in Italy is quite cheap. If you want to eat at a decent mid-level restaurant, you're going to be spending like 20 euros. If you want to eat at a decent mid-level restaurant in America, you're going to be paying a lot more. Groceries in Italy are not expensive, and we've talked about this a lot. So one of the things that Italians spend the most on is actually fashion. Italians are one of the biggest spenders in Europe when it comes to fashion, not only in the percentage of household income that goes to buying clothes, but in absolute value. The countries that spend the most of their percentage of their household income on clothes were Estonians, Portuguese, and Italians. Meanwhile, in absolute terms, the countries that spent the most money in absolute value were the UK, which makes sense because they have the pound, Germany, and then Italy, with Italians spending 64.3 billion on fashion in 2016. Between 2006 and 2016, Italy has always been amongst the top 3 highest spending countries in fashion. The countries in the top 3 would always change, but essentially Italy was always there, and fashion was one of, well, I wouldn't say fashion because we have to like disconnect fashion in the sense of Gucci, Prada, and the high fashion brands and the clothing sector in general. We're talking about the clothing sector in general. The clothing sector in general in Italy pretty much didn't get hit by the crisis. The crisis did not affect Italian spending on clothes, which I thought was really interesting. It's very culturally telling that Italians care a lot about their appearance. And one thing that somebody said to me was like, yeah, but it's because they're always buying those luxury fashion items. But it's not true. Italians do not make up the large percent of shares of people buying luxury fashion. The large percent of people buying luxury fashion are Asians, specifically Chinese, Middle Eastern, North Americans. These make up the largest purchases in luxury fashion. Italians do not, because honestly, the average Italian stipendio wouldn't even be able to afford a Versace shirt. This was spending on clothes. I would say that Italians do shop at Zara and these fast fashion places just as much as everybody else, but Italians are also more open and they have a higher propensity to buy things from like boutiques, which, okay, they don't cost as much as luxury, but they do cost much more than fast fashion. Italians are willing to spend a little bit more to get a little bit higher quality, but within reason. Another interesting point that I saw in this study was for every €1 spent on university in Italy, 5.5 euros gets spent on tobacco and alcohol. So for every euro spent on university, they spend €5.50 on tobacco and alcohol. And this number isn't shocking, but it's just telling because, okay, yes, it says that Italian university doesn't cost very much, especially compared to American university. We've talked about this on my channel ad nauseum, but I mean, it also shows you how much Italians like their tobacco and alcohol. I mean, if you look at smoking, just to compare the numbers, about 23.3% of Italians smoke. It is up 0.4% from last year. Whereas in America, the percentage is less than 15% of adults smoke. So it's almost 10% difference. And you see this, I've talked about this in my other videos, like a lot of people try to tell me, oh, Italians don't smoke that much. I mean, almost a quarter of your population smoking is kind of a lot, but whatever. And I was able to see it a lot more in the fact that in America, smoking cigarettes at least is seen as a very like icky thing to do. It's really ingrained in us, my generation, especially with DARE and all of the anti-smoking laws. Like we can't even have people smoking on TV. Like you can't show tobacco advertisement in most places in America. You can't smoke anywhere in most places in America. When we were in school, there were the kids that would smoke outside of the school in the beginning of the day, and they were kind of seen as the losers and outcasts. I don't wanna like say anybody's a loser or anything, but it just wasn't seen as a cool thing to do, which is so different in Italy. In Italy, it's seen as a cool thing to do. The ones that smoke are, the more adult, the more sophisticated. Teens smoke a lot here, and just in general, you'll see that people smoke. And so for me, coming from a place where smoking is seen as gross and not a lot of people do it, to a place where it's cool and many more people do it, it was a big, culture shock for me. And that's why I said that. That's a cultural difference, because of course that wouldn't be the same number for Americans because our college costs are astronomically higher, but also because smoking is not seen as cool and alcohol is not even accessible to people under 21, or not easily accessible to people under 21. Americans spend a lot on most things. They spend more on travel and transportation costs, but I guess that's kind of a given since America is so much bigger. It's very hard to live in most places if you don't have a car. I don't feel like that's the same in Italy. And also in Italy, using public transportation is just more normal. It's normal for somebody to take the train from this region to that region, travel by train, travel by bus. Whereas in America, it's not that normal unless you're very poor and if you don't live in the center of a big city. Even if you lived outside of a big city, you would still need the car to get to the city, to use the public transportation in the big city. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that Americans really like public transportation, and in fact, they spend a lot on transportation. Healthcare, insurance, and pensions, with the average household spending around $11,443 per year on healthcare, insurance, and pensions. And mind you that the average household income is like around $50,000. So about a fifth of their income goes into healthcare, insurance, and pensions. Healthcare per person is cheaper in Italy than it is in America. And personally for me, if I average my regular job with my side hustle, all the taxes that I make are from around 20% of my income is going to healthcare and taxes, which isn't much more than when I was working in America, to be honest, because when I was working in Connecticut, around 16 to 18% of my income was going every month to Social Security and taxes. So I mean, a lot of people would say that Italians and this free healthcare system that's not really free pay so much more than Americans, but I don't really see it. The only difference is that it's automatically taken out of your paycheck in Italy, so you don't even think about it. You automatically can use it whenever you need it, whenever you want. Whereas in America, you have to pay for it all out of pocket, and this $11,000 is just the base, assuming that you're healthy. If you get sick or if you need to use the healthcare system, you're gonna end up having to pay more. And one thing that I said that's more in my opinion, less data, is I feel like Americans spend more on convenience. I feel like Americans spend a lot of money on making their lives convenient and comfortable. If you think just at the fact of air conditioning, I've talked about the fact that not only air conditioning not as common in Italy as it is in most places in America, but it's even used differently. Like, oh my gosh, I be getting so annoyed by people that don't set the air conditioner cold enough, or they turn the air conditioner off during the summer. People here in Italy really believe that like the air conditioning is bad, it makes you sick, it's bad for the environment, and in some ways they're right. It's definitely not good for the environment to overuse air conditioning, but that's another tangent. Americans will pay a lot for air conditioning. Ooh, one thing I noticed, I saw in this other video, this girl was talking about how Americans pay a lot to like keep everything cold, not just their houses with air conditioning, but also their food. Did you guys ever notice that the different sizes between freezers in American and Italian fridges? In every Italian fridge that I've ever had, the freezer was like minuscule. It was really, really small. Whereas in a lot of modern American fridges, you'll have that the fridge is the same exact size as the freezer. We have to have ice in our drinks. We have to have, if something is cold, it has to be cold. And another reason why I think Americans spend a lot on this is because energy doesn't cost as much in America. We produce most of our own energy. Energy doesn't cost as much as it does in Italy. And so you'll see people get carried away, use it too much, and spend too much. We really like convenience. And I think there's definitely like room to improve on that. I also think there's room to improve on Italians that just like to suffer, like to sweat. No, I'm just kidding. But like when I'm here in the summertime in Milan without air conditioning and I just want to die and nobody around me seems to be affected, then I think that, yeah, Italians have room to improve. But also Americans, when it comes to how much convenience we want, we can improve as well. So yeah, you guys, those are the differences between American spending and Italian spending. What did you guys think? Did you find anything particularly interesting? Was there something that I left out? I definitely love to know your guys' opinion in the comment section down below, because like I said, this is a huge topic and I could only scratch the surface of it for time purposes. As always, I hope that you guys like the video, and remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one.